Welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to start where we ended last time, and that's with the buildings that we planned out in this area right here. Usually when I have a build that we are going to be working on, I have it all planned out and know exactly what I'm going to do. For the builds that we are working on today, I'm going to do something a little bit different. You see, right now I only know two things about these builds. I know the block palette I want to use, and I know the general style that I want them to be in, but the rest is a mystery, at least for now. So what we're going to do today is first take care of these guys, and then we're going to go through the design process together to get these builds completed. And since the focus of today's episode is about the design process, I've gone ahead and collected up all of the resources we're going to be using. So we have our deep slate, blackstone, bone block, smooth basalt, moss blocks, nether brick, stone, andesite, and our cyan blocks. Will that be enough to get these builds completed? I hope so, but looking at them all now, I'm not so sure. Sounds like that might be a future problem to deal with, because I want to get started with the building, and the first thing that we are going to build is the road, because that part we do know how to do, since we've built plenty of roads so far. We'll just need to remove some of these wool blocks, then clear out the grass blocks, and now we are left with a nice little area to build our road. At this point, I've built this road many times, so it's pretty easy to go through and get it built. The first step that I do is add in the gutter that goes along the side, and it's made up of 3 different blocks. We've got the stone blocks, we've got stone bricks, and we've got mossy stone brick. The next step is to add in the stone blocks, and for these I'm placing them in just a random order, making sure that I leave enough space for the other types of blocks that we're going to place here. After I finish placing in all of the stone, the next block that I add are stone bricks. The tricky part with placing in the stone bricks is making sure that I don't fill in all of the spaces, so that there's plenty of room for the other blocks we still need to add. Then it's time to add in the stone brick variants. So we've got cracked stone bricks and mossy stone bricks, and we place these in as well. Then we add in some gravel. The last set of blocks that we need to add in are the coral block, which will turn into the dead coral and not be the bright colors that they are right now. And we now have a nice little road that winds its way through the buildings that we are going to be working on today. You might notice that there are a couple of sections that look a little wide. This spot right here and this spot right up here. One thing that I was thinking about while building the road is that we might try to use this area to incorporate some stuff for the build that we are going to place here. So let's see what happens as we go along. But I think that leads us nicely into talking about the style of the builds that we are going to be working on today. Back when I was working on the design for these towers, this fountain, and this gateway, I also came up with some designs for houses that I thought I would use to put into the city. In fact, I was going to put the houses right where we ended up building the wolf farm, but I didn't like how the houses compared with the builds that we had already completed, so I was stuck as far as what I was going to do. But then while watching a documentary on Roman architecture, I got an idea that is going to be the basis for the builds today. One of the most common buildings used in ancient Rome to house residents were apartment buildings, which the Romans called insula. And these buildings had several details that I think would really fit with what we have going in this area. For example, they would be relatively tall, with some being up to 9 stories. They would have arches on the exterior, and they would have a central courtyard, which would allow light to get to the middle of the building. So let's get started with the design process and see what we can come up with. I think this building right here will be the perfect one to start with, because it's a relatively simple design, it's a rectangle, and that will allow us to focus the most on getting all of the details down that we can then apply to the other buildings in this area. For the first story, I think what we are going to do is have a series of arches that go along the exterior of the wall. So I've gone through and spaced out the arches so that there's 3 blocks in between each one. And we're going to probably go up, I think 7 blocks will be good. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think that's a good height for the first floor. Let's get the rest of them in place. Getting these arches into place gives us a good idea of how tall the first story is going to be, and I think this is a good height. We're not going to have it just be all deep slate bricks. We're going to mix in some other blocks to add more detail, but that's going to be later. The next thing that I want to do is add in the wall that is going to go behind these arches. And while we could do it with the deep slate bricks, I think that's going to cause it to blend too much in with the arches. So let's try some different blocks. I think using cyan terracotta could actually be a really good option, especially if we were to use some other blocks to add in some shading. Let's get some more blocks placed. I like how the cyan terracotta works with deep slate bricks, but this front is looking just not so good having it right up against the street. Maybe if we were to create a bit of an opening so that the main wall is further back, like back to this area, that might be a good idea. Let's give that a try. Having moved the wall back, I think this looks much better. But having just the terracotta looks a little boring, and we can make it more interesting by adding a little color and variation to it. So let's start by adding some gray wool and some gray concrete powder into the corners to just darken it up a little bit. I think the gray concrete powder and gray wool add some nice shading to the wall. Let's get the rest filled in. The next thing that we need to work on is breaking up the deep slate brick texture because that's just going to look very boring if it's all the same. Let's try adding some deep slate tiles at the base. That'll make it have a little bit of shadow at the bottom. And then we can also use some of the smooth basalt to break it up at the top level. I think something like that will look pretty good. The build is now looking appropriately textured, but there is one thing that's missing. And that's some color, because right now it's looking very dark gray. We should add some color to make it a little bit brighter. And to keep it consistent with the rest of the builds, we are going to use some cyan colors. So we've got some warped planks, we have some warped warp blocks, and we've got some cyan wool and cyan concrete powder. We're going to mix them up as we go around this layer. Adding some color definitely helped, but that's a very sharp line, and I have just the perfect thing to fix that. It's time for some slabs, and I think alternating some polished andesite and polished deep slate slabs will be just the thing that we need. Why are you interrupting my building? I added in all of the slabs, and originally I was going to keep it so that there was just a half block space showing where the cyan blocks were at, but that made the bottom part look a little heavy. So I moved the slabs down just to see how that would look, and I think that that works much better. But then having the full size of the cyan blocks makes it very strong. So fortunately, I think I have the solution, which is what I did over here and adding the walls in an alternating pattern like that. Let's see what that would look like. So I've tried out a couple of different things. I've added in the walls, but I think this looks too thick. So I tried lowering it, and I think this is what we are going to go with. Having the slabs up at this level made this area right here look too thick, and by lowering it, this now looks much better. Having the full block up above won't be a problem because we can do things here to make it not seem so bad. And of course, I figured this out after placing the slabs all the way around the building. But now that they've all been moved down, I think that was the right decision to make. Before we start on the second story, we need to do something in the interior. One of the features of these buildings is having a light well in the center, which allows light to come in and reach all the way down. So I've outlined where that is going to be. We need to build that up so that we can start on the second story. For these gaps here, I was thinking we could put in some andesite stairs, and that would look really nice to break up the texture of the deep slate brick. I think that the central courtyard is coming together very nicely. I built it up to the second level and added in some bone blocks at the layer where the cyan color is on the exterior wall, and I think that that is a nice break from the deep slate. The next thing that we need to do is add a couple of windows, and I think that the best place to do that will be right along here. If we build out the scaffolding, we can break these two blocks, which will be good. And then over here, we'll do the same thing with these two blocks as well. I think that these windows are a little bit too short, so we're going to break one more block, and that's much better. Now we need to do the second story of the exterior wall, and I am trying to think what I want to do for that. I think if we go along here, we're going to bring this side up to be at the same level as this one. And then maybe we should try doing the same type of arches that we did on the first story. That's not terrible, but I think that they're a little bit too short. Let's try some. Taking out that bottom layer helped, but we are going to run into some problems because if we do that over here, we're going to be right where the cyan blocks are, and that's not going to be good. We could go along and add some stairs and a slab there, which would give us a little bit of a different type of opening. So we could put a slab here to keep it symmetrical, but I think that that makes this top part too heavy. Maybe we should just raise the whole thing up so that these are up at this level. Let's give that a try. Let's put a stair there, and the slab there. Yeah, I think that's what we're going to have to do. So we'll just remove these blocks here, then build up some pillars, add stairs and slabs to the bottom level, and then stairs and slabs to the top level. And then it's time to start placing the interior wall. So we are going to go ahead and start with the gray wool, the gray concrete powder, and finally the cyan terracotta. And we now have the structure for the second story completed. And I think for the third story, we are going to be doing something very similar. So let's build up the interior wall and then the exterior wall. And we now have the third story all completed, which means it's now time to start adding in the details to finish up this building. I think the first thing that we need to do is build a raised porch for the front of the building. I think that ought to do it. The next thing that we need to do is start adding in some doors so that there's a way to get into the building. And for that, I think what we are going to do is put a polished andesite stair at the top and then a door right there, which I like. And then I think we are going to add some soul lanterns in these archways. Next up, we have this area over here, and I think what we're going to do is turn this into a balcony. So let's get a floor put in, which I think will need to be andesite slabs because we have the andesite slabs here. And if we don't use andesite slabs, they're not going to fit here. That's looking better, but we need a roof, and the roof is going to be made out of nether bricks, which have now all been placed. I've been looking at this side of the building, and I think there is something that we still need to add to bring a little bit more interest, because right now it's looking rather plain. But to get it added, we need to go back to where my starter storage system is, because that is where the blocks that we need are located. So let's grab the blocks that are in this chest. So what we are going to be doing is adding in some windows, and instead of using glass, we are going to use these honeycomb blocks to be able to create the impression that there are lighted windows in the building. And something like that should be good. And with the windows added in, I think we are all finished up with this building, and it's turned out really well. And now that we have all of the design elements figured out, it's time to get the rest of the buildings built. So let's get going. That took so much longer than expected, and I think the end result is something that is a really good start to our city. And this angle gives us the best view of all of the buildings that we have built today. Over here, we've got the first one where we worked out the details, and you can see those details sprinkled throughout the different ones that I did, with this one being the largest. And I think that they all work really well when combined together. Walking down in between the buildings, we can see some of the other builds that we have completed framed between them, with the wool farm having some of the best framing between these two, the bamboo farm at this corner, or coming around this corner and seeing the marketplace above our storage room. But even with the progress that we have made today over here, there is so much more work to be completed. But that will have to wait for future episodes, because we are out of time for today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a like. If you want to see more, please subscribe. And until next time, see ya later.